Yo, 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 what's good, Rush Nation? Welcome to episode 84 of 5 Yard College. I'm with my main man, as always, Ash. You're with me again. It is a Wednesday, not a Monday. We don't know where we are, but we know that we're right here, right now. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, doing very good, thank you. A bit later in the week, but we are still here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I was supposed to be on part of the Super Bowl show on Monday, which hasn't actually come out yet. I think it's either Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure what Merv's plans are with that, but I had a nightmare at bedtime and our times got messed up, so I didn't end up being on that, which is why we didn't record on Monday, even though we could have recorded on Monday, but we're here on Wednesday. We are here to, I guess, primarily talk through the Senior Bowl, a bit of
Yeah.
Shrine Bowl. We've got some news, Ash. Anything else that I've missed that we're going to be covering, or
No, I
where
think
are we?
that's the majority of it. I think the Senior Bowl's been the big thing last week, so that's going to be the main talking point of the pod.
Yeah, and what I've found really good about the Senior Bowl specifically this year is, although I haven't seen much of it, I've seen a lot more chat on social media and in our group chats and stuff about how the Pro Bowl was so bad that people have switched over and watched the Senior Bowl, which they should be doing, because the Pro Bowl is NFL players being lauded as, I guess, the best, even though it was a vote, and then they're not even really playing football because there's no tackling. Whereas the Senior Bowl is all about players who are trying to get into the NFL and players that we should be paying attention to. So it's the way
Yeah.
it should be. Let's just have the Pro Bowl games and then have the worst two teams in the NFL battle it out for the number one spot, and then everyone switch over and watch some Senior Bowl, because that's where all the action is, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like you say, they've all got something to prove still, so they'll push it hard, especially in the practices, and then also in the game as well. It's a bit more than an exhibition for these guys, and you can tell.
Yeah. Do you think with the practices there? I know that if you are plugged into college football, like some of our listeners are, and yourself and Jordan, the writers and stuff, the practice sessions are not not readily available, because you sort of have to try and look for them a little bit. But do you think they're understated in importance for the casual college football fan who perhaps doesn't really know the importance of them?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that for the Senior Bowl in particular, I think a lot of scouts, teams, analysts, all those take a lot more out of practice than they actually do for the game, because we said earlier, obviously they do push it hard in the actual game, but it's in the practices that you really see the players perform and not perform, and show what they are and aren't good at. It gives you a better indication. It's almost like the watching Hard Knocks, seeing the players in practice. These guys are in practice, trying to prove themselves to the NFL coaches that are watching, and anyone else who might be there, and obviously the NFL coaches and teams that are managing the two teams, because of course every year a different NFL program goes to do the national and the American teams. Obviously, it was the Jets and the Lions this year.
Yeah, and even it was Dan Quinn for the Lions, I think, was going to be the sort of head coach, if you will, but he almost took a step back and let the younger coaches come in
Yeah,
and actually run the show, which I think is good, because these guys are. We're seeing it in the NFL, where the younger coaches come from college, like Cliff Kingsbury and alike, where they bring the college game to the NFL in a younger way. And I think the two head coaches, Sean McVay and who's the head coach of the Bengals, Zach Taylor, it's the
yeah.
youngest head coaches in Super Bowl history. I mean, that's saying something for how the game is perhaps developing. I don't know. It's just an observation I've made, and perhaps with the younger coaches now being given a chance in the Senior Bowl and stuff like that, it's brilliant to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, I had one. Oh, we're talking about the practices. Uh, somebody who I don't think managed to play in the game but had a good week was Boise State receiver Khalil Shakir. I don't know if he actually made it onto the field during the game, Ash.
No, I don't believe he was involved in the game.
I couldn't see it from the box score
No, I don't.
or any.
No, I don't think he was involved in the actual game itself. There was a few guys from the practice that didn't actually participate in in the game for whatever reason, and I think Shakir was one of those. I think he missed Thursday practice as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Really? Because
I
I saw
believe
a couple of clips. I saw a
No,
couple of
sorry,
clips.
no, he was. Sorry, no, he was at Thursday practice. I was
Right.
thinking of Jermaine Johnson, the Florida State edge. Yeah,
Yeah, Shakir had a couple of unbelievable days of practice from what I saw on social media and stuff, and he's, the boy is. I think he could be really good. He could be really, really good.
yeah. He Thursday was the best day for him. I think Wednesday, of course, for those that saw it, it was horrible weather-wise, and he had a few drop passes with a wet ball, but he runs his routes really well, and he in those like one-on-one drills, he performed well. He looked quick, and he looked like he could beat the man. And I
He's
think
really smooth in his separation,
yeah,
which is good because although you want quickness and suddenness in your cuts and stuff to create separation, it can almost be too jerky at times. Where he was really smooth with his transitions and his movement and getting to the opposite side of the defender and stuff. And I think he could be somebody to watch definitely in the combine if he participates and pro day and stuff because his draft stock could rise a little bit. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Senior Bowl in a little bit. Let's talk about the Shrine Bowl, which happened on Thursday, the 3rd of February. The West saw off the East 25-24 in this year's Shrine Bowl. Ash, for those who perhaps have no idea what the Shrine Bowl is, why don't you fill in Rush Nation as to what the Shrine Bowl is and perhaps it's being overshadowed by the Senior Bowl?
yeah. So it's in the essence are similar to the Pro Bowl and the Senior Bowl in that regard, but it's an all-star exhibition game essentially. They do it on behalf of it's one of the charities. I think it's a children's hospital, and it's essentially showcasing the top players of college that aren't at the Senior Bowl, and it does obviously get overshadowed slightly because they're of course not that it's played in the same week as the Senior Bowl, but it's got its own merits, and it's showing players that have, like I said, played well in the previous season, and also that prospects for the draft, and they are like the Senior Bowl. They are given NFL or former NFL and present NFL coaches, and they're drilled in NFL scenarios, and so like 4-3 defense and all that sort of stuff. And it's another area for players that aren't necessarily invited to the Senior Bowl to show themselves. And I think the coaching staff this year there's a lot of the Ravens there, and there was a few Falcons involved. But yeah, it's very similar to the Senior Bowl, just not on the same scale, basically.
Gotcha. So in the Shrine Bowl this year, Brown University's quarterback EJ Perry was the MVP. He had 214 yards and 3 touchdowns and led the East All-Stars back from a 19-0 deficit. The East were not able to complete the comeback with my boy, Virginia tight end Jelani Woods, recovering the onside kick, which he tipped to himself and caught whilst falling. All very exciting stuff.
Yeah, Jelani Woods had a great game. To be fair to him, he got a touchdown, and of course he got the the onside kick to see out the game. But he had a good week of practice as well throughout, so he was one that impressed. And obviously you mentioned EJ Perry there; he was on the losing end, but he still got the MVP. He had a solid game. Get confident in his throws, found his men regularly, and that was good to see. And one final guy I want to speak about from the Shrine Bowl is someone that I've spoken to before, Stocks, but I don't think I've said about it in the pod before. Is Pierre Strong Jr., the running back from South Dakota State, so he's an FCS player. He had a solid week of practice as a running back and a receiver. He didn't have a great deal to do for a majority of the first half, at least in the Shrine Bowl. But when he did have it, he was comfortable with the ball, and he got himself a 65-yard catch in the third quarter. So he's had a solid week and finished it off with a solid performance in the Shrine Bowl.
It doesn't matter whether it's you or Tom. There will, at one point during the season, there will always be an SDSU or a North Dakota, South Dakota player that is
Yeah.
lighting it up somewhere along the line. So that's good to see, good to hear.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, there was a North Dakota in the Senior Bowl as well that we'll get to. So both the Dakota programs were in the spotlight this week.
yeah, somebody who, I mean, this is old news now if you aren't living under a rock, but we've mentioned Caleb Williams every week. We mentioned him on the mock draft last week with the Dynasty Boys. Shout out to the Dynasty Boys for having us on. It was great fun. Unfortunately, Ash, you couldn't be there because you were up in Middle Earth once again. But I think I don't know whether you heard it or you listened or watched, but I think we did you proud. And I didn't
That
manage
was
to
good.
get both the Ohio boys in because I ran out of time. But we talked about Caleb Williams then, and then the news broke either just before or whilst we were filming, and we didn't see it. And that's former Oklahoma quarterback Caleb Williams has finally become a USC player and rejoins Lincoln Riley. Riley was forced to defend USC transfer activity and has said, "We didn't take players from Oklahoma, we took players from the transfer portal," which I suppose is fact. Williams makes it 3 seniors who have committed to Riley and USC this offseason. So, whilst that is a truth statement, Ash, it's also just covering up the fact that Riley has taken everyone with him.
Yeah, I understand what he's saying, and of course he's going to say that to the media to protect USC and himself. But I think it's obviously telling the relationship he had with these players and the confidence they have of him as a head coach that they've entered the transfer portal, and of course they've ended up at USC. So you can't blame him. He was obviously their coach last year. They were successful. We've heard a lot of good things about him, and of course he's expected to do great things at USC. And he's now obviously got one of the top quarterbacks who's going to be under center and working with him again. So all signs are pointing up to USC. Let's just say that.
Absolutely. Ash, we've had a question come in from Twitch. It's from GZDR for Ev. There's probably a name in there, but I apologize if I've massacred that. And they say, would you condemn a player who decides to, I'll put it on the screen for everyone, who decides to play in the Senior Bowl, but refuses to play in the bowl game their team was invited to, so they don't get hurt and screw up their draft position?
No, I don't think I would, because at the end of the day, the Senior Bowl for many is the start of the draft process. It is a full-on contact game, as we saw. It's a lot more. It's a lot more in depth than the Pro Bowls are, as we mentioned at the start of the pod. But at the same time, it is still an exhibition for these prospects. Whereas a bowl game is, in many regards, a fully competitive. We want to win this bowl game. So no, I don't. I don't condemn them at all. I think this is now them focusing on the draft rather than the team when they were out with college. It's more of a personal to increase their draft stock. So I have no qualms about it, and I can't speak for it not being involved, but I don't think teams would either. And I think it's probably something that teams would question in their interviews that, of course, they have at the combine and at their pro days, because it does read into some players' mindsets, because some of them do it for the wrong reasons. Whereas I think a lot of them do it to protect themselves. And then, of course, they've got the Senior Bowl where they can just train if they want to. They can participate in the practices. And we saw a number of players who didn't actually play in the game, whether they picked up a knock or they were holding a knock and they were just doing training. It's something we see every year. It's something that is spoken about every year with players opting out of bowl games. But I don't condemn players personally, and I don't think teams would, in the grand scheme of things, depending on their reasons that we wouldn't hear inside of an interview.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I can't off the top of my head think of anybody that has perhaps done it this year. Maybe GZ, if you have anyone specifically you want to mention, hit us up in the comments. We can talk about it again. Ash is probably Googling it right now, but it feels like something that would be difficult to find in a really quick space of time. So we'll stick a pin in that one, but we can come back to it at any point if there are comments made. Obviously, Lincoln Riley has a fantastic relationship with all the players that have joined him. Oh, Buckeyes, Ash. The guy's come in.
I was about to say Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. I think Petit Ferrer did as well. Yeah, we've mentioned it on previous pods that when they opted out, maybe they felt that they've proven everything they need to in terms of college. It depends on who you ask, will give you a different opinion. I think as a watcher, as a supporter of college football, you don't like it because the players aren't there. They're not playing for your team. Um, as a fan of individual college players and their draft stock and their future in the NFL, I completely understand the decision to do so.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting back to Lincoln Riley and USC. It's the type of thing that you want to see, not necessarily just as a USC fan, because that is fantastic that your new head coach is coming. And I'm not saying that all the players, they want to see the players from Oklahoma come. It's a fact that the relationship, as you said, Lincoln Riley has built with these players shows what kind of a leader is. And as a fan of USC, you must be thinking, licking your lips and thinking, this guy's obviously got something about him where this is the head coach that we have wanted for a while now, and this is a gig he obviously felt that he could take and run with, and it's not something that I think is nefarious in any way. It's just the relationship he built with the players at Oklahoma is so strong that they were willing to follow him wherever, and that for me goes hugely into his favor as a head coach, and it shows not just for USC but me as a fan of college football how important a good head coach role is for these young kids.
Yeah, you're completely right. I think the head coach has a massive impact on this. Lincoln Riley going there, but I think people now are also seeing what this program is going to potentially be able to do. Not only with the transfers they brought in, but with what was already there. Yes, they are losing some players to the draft this year, but a lot of it rests on Riley as a head coach and what he's already achieved. He's highly rated before this, and many people expected him to be taking the step to the NFL this year. He's decided to obviously go to USC. All signs are pointing to that being at this present moment in time something that's just going to increase his personal stock even more. And it comes down to him as a coach, the mentality he instills in his players, and the fact that they want to follow him is a massive indicator of that.
Yep. Michigan's offensive coordinator Josh Gattis is taking over the Miami OC role for the 2022 season. Michigan are now without both their coordinators after DC Mike McDonald left for the Baltimore Ravens. Jim Harbaugh may have rejected the NFL advances, but he's now got to rebuild his core staff for the upcoming season. We saw them do it very well last year in a huge flip round for Jim Harbaugh and what went on there, Ash. Is this now a step too far, perhaps? Obviously, Ohio State are the Big Ten favourites. Do you
Yeah.
think that this is now going to be a rebuild a little bit too far for Jim?
I don't think. I'm not sure. I wouldn't think so. I think he will bring in equally credible offensive and defensive coordinators to assist him once again. And I think that it came out. I don't know if it was today or if it was yesterday, but Gattis didn't have the best of things to say. Not directly, but he said, "I'm just trying to remember the exact quote, but it was along the sort of lines of if you're not happy being there, then you need to leave." And it was a bit of it. It wasn't a direct like slate on Michigan, but it did seem to sort of have an indicator that he wasn't happy at Michigan. And I think the fact he's gone to Miami in the same role probably backs up that statement that maybe he wasn't happy there. But I think from a Michigan standpoint, from a Jim Harbaugh standpoint, obviously he's decided to reject the advances of the Vikings. Apparently that was only a one-time thing. Of course, he's going to say that because he's decided to come back. We won't ever know what happened in those discussions. But I believe he'll be able to bring in guys that are equally up for the job as they were this year. And they've got some impressive young guys there, in particular from the 2021 freshman group that are going to look to take a step up. So he's going to have to get it right because last year was a massive year for them, and they're going to want to continue on that trend. And it's a lot of that's going to be coming down to obviously the staff that's in play.
Yeah, and like I said, they did it last year when Jim took a pay cut and rebuilt the staff that way. It isn't unheard of, or not unheard of. It's not hugely unlikely that it doesn't do it again. And I just wonder whether last year was their one shot for the few years, and maybe there'll be maybe the rebuild will be strengthening and push forward. Ash, you're going to have to explain this next one to me. So Levis Overton, the number one recruit, excuse me, of the 2023 class, is reclassifying to the 2022 class. Overton is yet to announce his final commitment. That's expected to happen in April. The five-star defensive end is deciding between, guess who? Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oregon, and Texas A&M. So how do you reclassify to the 2022 class from the 2023 class?
So he's essentially doing what Quinn Ewers did last year. He's declaring for college a year early, like when they declare for the draft a year early. I don't know the exact ins and outs of how it works from high school to college, but from my understanding, it is a similar transition. They've essentially declared to go to college a year early, to enroll a year before, and that's exactly what Overton is doing. I'm not surprised. Much like you as last year, he was the number one of his class, highly touted. Unlike you as last year, he hasn't actually got his school yet. He's still making that decision, which makes it a little different.
I was going to say this is hugely different in the fact that Quinn Ewers was nailed on as Ohio State.
Yeah.
Was that all NIL deal? It's setting himself up early, getting himself some payment before then switching to Texas. Not that was ever might have been the plan. We can never say because we don't know. But like you say, he hasn't chosen his school yet. So this must be something to do with feeling he's ready to get to the college game, as opposed to sorting himself at NIL wise.
Yeah, I think so. He's from everything I've read and everything I've seen about him and his profile, he is not only a great athlete, of course, being the number one prospect of the class, but he's also got high grades, and his, I think it's GPA or whatever they have over there. He's a smart kid from all intents and purposes. So that will obviously go a long way in saying that he feels he's ready to take that step up as well. I do find it interesting that he's making that decision without deciding on the school he's going to, but maybe he's already pretty honed in on the school that he wants, but he's obviously just given himself another couple of months to completely decide that.
Yep. Finally, Washington offensive tackle Jackson Kirkland has announced he is withdrawing from the 2022 NFL draft and seeking a return to Washington for this season's for next year. Kirkland is currently out with an ankle injury, which turned out to be more serious than previously thought. The offensive tackle will have to petition to the NCAA for reinstatement and is expected to undergo surgery on his ankle this month. So this should make George pretty happy, Ash.
Yeah, I'd say so. Obviously, but as long as he's able to return to the field, he needs to get clearance, of course, because he essentially left college to go to the draft. He's now going back to college, so it's similar scenario to when someone enters the transfer portal. Obviously, not quite in the same regard, but previously, before the whole COVID pandemic happened, there was more often than not a player had to sit out a year if they changed schools, and then they had to basically petition to be able to play in that same year. It's similar to sort of for Kirkland here. He's declared a year early, but he's now obviously gone back on that because of injury. I would say it's the right choice. His draft stock is essentially would take a hit because he wouldn't be able to go to the Senior Bowl. He wouldn't be able to go to the combine, the pro days. He's going to be really hampered on what he can do in the off season because this injury is worse than first thought. I think it's yesterday he went for surgery. I haven't seen anything since then, but it's the actual injury itself he's expected to make a full recovery from. But obviously, yeah, he's decided to try and go back for one last year, get fit at college, have another year of playing, hopefully, as long as he gets back on the field in good time, and try again for the 2023 draft.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk some Senior Bowl. We've done the News and Shrine Bowl. Senior Bowl obviously is in the books now. National team came out 2010 winners over the American team. Ash and I are going to run through some of the practice days, run through anything that we found interesting from that. Then we'll get to the game. Not the highest scoring of games, Ash. I don't know if this is normal for the Senior Bowl. Does it tend to be lower or higher?
It's a good question. You caught me there because I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone what happened in previous senior bowls. But I watched.
I spend every moment of every week trying to catch you out, Ash.
Yeah,
So the
you
fact that
really,
I've managed to
really
do it,
do,
I've got
don't
you.
you? I know that. I mean, they're more often than not quite tight affairs. I'm recalling. I think last year, 2021 was a one-score game. I think 2020, of course, didn't happen because of no 2020. Sorry, the Senior Bowl did happen, and that was, I think that was more on the national side, or North as they were called when they did it in 2019. I believe it was 2019, 2020. But they are usually tight affairs because, of course, they're players that don't play together at all for the large part. New coaches, whole week of practice, and then into a game. It's always going to be a bit. It's going to be a bit, and there's lots of chopping and changing of the players as well. Of course, there's 3 QBs on each side. There's multiple running backs. There's lots of players coming in and out. So it's going to be rare to see it as a high scoring affair.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk some American team first, as that is the tab I have open in front of me. Where do you want to start?
On the practices, we need to start there. There was a number of guys who had great weeks. There was guys that didn't have great weeks. I think the first guy I want to mention, and he was a standout in the game as well, is Malik Willis. I think he, out of all of the quarterbacks in the training and in the game, I think he probably came out on top. He didn't do a great deal in the game with his arm, but he did a lot of his feet. But throughout the week, all of the quarterbacks just didn't really pop off the page. But I think Willis, out of all of them, proved the most, not only with his legs, but on the day where it was raining quite heavily and it was horrible weather, the Wednesday practice, despite the fact that it was horrible weather, he was still making some great throws. Obviously, in large parts, he had some inconsistencies on the day, but it's the passes themselves. When he got them off, they were great. And in that sort of weather, to be able to do that is no small feat. Again, like we say, all these players, very rarely, a few of them are teammates, but the majority of them have never played together before. He does still seem like the one who is the biggest prospect, as you would call it, because at times his overall accuracy looked shaky, but you just can't get over the impact he has with his legs. He can make something happen at the drop of a hat. He showed that in the game. He showed that in drills. It's just he's got to work on a few of those fundamentals, like his accuracy and I think his overall decision making at times. But there's no disputing his athleticism, and I think that can get him out of holes. But we mentioned it, I think, on the mock draft episode. He's a sort of quarterback that's going to have to sit. And coming out of the Senior Bowl as being one of the most spoken about quarterbacks and the one who has, from all intents and purposes, from what I've seen at least from other outlets and other reporters and alike, seems to have made the biggest impression and the biggest impact on his stock draft. We could potentially see him at a team that's going to be needing a quarterback day one, which I'm still on the mindset that isn't Willis. Willis needs to sit and Willis needs to learn the game to iron out some of those kinks that he's got to be able to be an exceptional quarterback, because it does seem like it's there, and that athleticism is just a cherry on top. The way he can use his feet, if he can get his overall passing down and his decision making, he's going to be a top quality quarterback. But I'm just a bit concerned if he is being asked to step in day one, it's going to be a lot on him while he's still learning the game.
So you hit the nail on the head with pretty much your very first sentence, is that of these American quarterbacks, there wasn't a single one of them that went bang, he's got it nailed in. You know, Sam Howell was Sam Howell. He did Sam Howell things, but it's not as if we thought, wow, Sam Howell's better here than he had been all season, because we know who Sam Howell is now. We saw him use his legs a bit in the season, and that was great for his game, but he didn't really do anything practice-wise. Willis, for all his pros and cons in the game, and most of it was pro, you mentioned it, he was wildly inaccurate at times, and then finally Bailey Zapp, for the season he had, he looks like a guy who just wants to sort of stand in the pocket and pick out those short yardage throws, and is
Yeah.
very scared to throw deep. Now, maybe that can be taught, or not to necessarily arm power. If he hasn't got the arm power, it's a bit late, but perhaps his decision making when throwing deep or increasing his confidence when throwing deep, that might be able to be taught. But it was, I've seen several things now on a couple of forums that I'm a member of and on social media where NFL scouts have said, having seen the Senior Bowl, and yes, Malik Willis was good, there isn't a day one starter amongst any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft. And that, as somebody who's watching the draft and then somebody who is a fan of an NFL team who needs a quarterback, that is a very worrying statement if it is true.
Yeah, I think that was telling on this draft, on this quarterback class for this draft, that yes, they're all very close in their projections. They're all very close in their abilities, despite the fact they're all very different quarterbacks. But I think coming out the Senior Bowl, you're right. There isn't a guy that you look at and go, yeah, he can lead a team from day one. That is the concerning part. They've all got really good and positive bits of their game, but they all seem to still be learning the trade. And it's not the most. Yeah, there's not anyone that stands out to you that you can be happy to start day one. And like you, my NFL team now needs a quarterback as well. So I'm also looking at this draft class and sort of holding my breath a little bit.
Yeah, it's. I tell you, the last few draft classes we've seen, there's been chat about the quarterbacks and stuff early doors. People have moved up, but if they're not sure on this quarterback class, the draft could be really interesting in a sideways way that we're just not expecting. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun come April. Anybody else you want to talk about from the Americans from the skill positions, Ash?
See, someone I want to talk about that unfortunately was only there for one day was Devonta Price, the Florida International running back. It's only quickly on him because unfortunately he was only there for the Tuesday, but on the Tuesday I think he was one of the best running backs out of both teams on the day. He looked solid in every running drill he did. He had good vision to find the space, and and he managed to find the holes, and he also waited. He had that patience that you like to see from a running back, to wait for the holes to open up and then explode into them. Just on the one day of practice that we saw, unfortunately, we didn't see him for the rest of the practice. He looked solid, and I think just from that one day, he did his draft stock a bunch of favors. And then I think from the wide receivers on the American side, Calvin Austin came in as one of the guys for people to watch out for. He had 3 solid days, despite his size. He is a smaller back, but he just creates his own space, and the separation from the defenders was top tier, and his route running was on point pretty much every day, and he makes up for his smaller size, yet by still competing for the ball, and more often than not he was coming away with it, and then at the same time he's got that elusiveness because he is a smaller size. And I think the day 3 in particular was the standout for him, and then of course he also impressed on the game in the limited capacity that he was involved.
I think running back wise, somebody for me who not impressed, but showed me something that he hadn't shown much of during the season was Brian Robinson Jr. You know, people have had him down as this running back for Alabama who's just the sort of plodder. He's not the Alabama running back we're all used to seeing from previous years, and isn't great in the receiving game, but he had a really good 3 days of practice receiving and showed that he's got good hands. So for him, that was arrow up. And then I think Greg Dulcich, Ash.
The UCLA tight end, yeah.
Yeah, how do you say his last name?
I would say Dulcich, but
no, that's
we always say the names wrong as the Brits. But,
Yeah, but we're allowed to. So Greg Dulcich.
That's true.
I think I've heard that on a podcast before. Let's go with it. What impressed for me was his blocking style. He's not just a guy who gets in there and uses his mass to stop the running. He was technically pretty good, and as we like to see with our big time tight ends, he showed his passing ability during the season with UCLA. he showed his blocking ability here. And when I'm not saying he's a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle or a Kyle Pitts, although Pitts' blocking wasn't great, but it's okay. We like to see a bit of blocking from our tight end. So with Greg Dulcich providing a little bit on tape during the week, that also meant arrow up for him. Ash, I know you like your offensive lineman. Is there anybody you'd like to talk from the American team?
From the American offensive lineman, on the practice, there wasn't anyone that really stood out for me. I think the guy I was paying attention to mainly because he came up in our mock draft, but also because he is one of the higher rated guys on the American side, is Derrian Kendrick, the tackle from Kentucky. I think he showed his physicality throughout most of the weekend. He is a powerful tackle. He also took a few reps on the interior. I don't think that's going to be his overall game, but if he is called upon there, he showed on, I think it was on Thursday, that if he is moved to interior lineman in the run game, he can make smaller defenders pay. He'll move them with ease. He's got good hands and he has got good explosiveness. And I think out of all of the offensive linemen on the American side, he is probably the standout for me.
Okay, let's move to the national team. We talked a lot about the quarterbacks on the American team. The national team, obviously, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Carson Strong, names that we have all spoke about hugely during the season. Anybody impress you or lose your confidence of these three, Ash?
Practice-wise, all three of them struggled on their own days. I think Carson Strong, unfortunately, from day one, was pretty inconsistent. He's shown that he's probably got the best arm, the strongest arm out of all of the quarterbacks in out of these six in particular, but probably the whole class, that he can make those deep throws. And he made some lovely throws, but he was inconsistent. In particular on Wednesday, just his throws. Some of them were great, and then at other times he just seemed to misread everything and almost at times then put too much on it. He sort of over reliant on his arm, on his strength in his arm, and would miss the target. And then of course on the game day he's probably the least flattering out of all of them, unfortunately. Ridder started off the Tuesday. He had a very up and down day. Again, another player that's got a solid arm and has got the physical running stats to back that up from his size and the way he can move with the ball. But again, just inconsistent on some of those passing drills, and he put some balls to areas where you don't want to see, but then at the same time he then put the ball in the perfect place. And it was a similar thing from Pickett. They just on the national side, the quarterbacks, all three of them, when it was in terms of just the practices, were up and down all week. And from practice alone, I don't think any of them stood out. As a whole, I think on the game, there was a clear standout from the game, but that might be because he has the most time, and that was Ridder. Pickett got one quarter and then sat out for the rest of the game. Ridder came in, scored a couple touchdowns, looked impressive, despite the pressure that the defensive line were given to him. And then unfortunately Carson Strong, again, much like his week of practice in the game itself, some of his passes looked off. He threw an interception, and he just sort of never really found his footing.
Yeah. It was a shame for Pickett having. This was, I think, a really good platform for him to showcase his skills, and he just didn't have a good 3 days or game. So it's unfortunate for him. Somebody I would like to touch on is Tyler Badie. Everybody knows that he's a great receiving back, but his vision shone out through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Wednesday wasn't a great day, but Thursday showed his patience when waiting for a gap to open up is very good. We hadn't seen it necessarily superbly through the season, but he showed again that he's reliable in the passing game, and the patience to hit the hole and use his speed was evident on all 3 days, Ash.
Yeah, definitely. I think he out of all of them, from a training, from a practice point of view, I think Badie, impressed the most in terms of what the expectation from me personally was, and from what he showed. And then obviously on the game day, you had the likes of Abraham Smith, who didn't have a great week of practice. He had some issues when it came to finding the holes that were made in the drills, and to sort of struggle to make space and to keep hold of the balls when it came to the passing work. And then on the flip side of that, he was probably the best running back in the actual game environment for the Saturday. So he sort of did the opposite of some of these players with a poor practice, and showed it on the field. And similar to Rashad White, I think Rashad White struggled day one on the passing. He showed good speed at times in some of the 7-on-7 drills, but just sort of left a lot to be desired. But I think his week slowly got better and better. Thursday was probably his best day of practice, and then again he showed some flash on the game itself. And I think then that was summed up with his picking up that fumble and almost running through about 7 or 8 players that were on top of him to get a touchdown. Didn't quite happen, but he had the wherewithal to pick the fumble up from Ridder instantly, and drive forward, and it almost came off for him.
Yeah, we talked to Khalil Shakir earlier. We won't go back to that. Actually, I realised for the American side of the practice, we forgot all defensive players. Huge.
I thought we were going to do offense and then defense. So. Because the best player of the whole practice is on the American side that we did. So I was assuming we do offense and then go back to defense, But
no, you can do that. Well saved. I should have put that in the chat and not embarrassed myself publicly there. But hey, let's. Anybody else from the offense on the national side you want to talk through?
Yes, so a couple more guys. One of them is another skill player. I mentioned him earlier, North Dakota State wide receiver. That's Christian Watson. He was probably one of the most consistent wide receivers on the national side for practice, and was incredibly impressive in the game in the limited work that he did. From the game itself, I think his performance was summed up by the underthrow from Ridder. Watson got himself into space. The ball was underthrown to Watson. He almost fell to the floor, picked it back up. And of course, the difference between the college game and the NFL game is, as long as they're not touched, they can get back up and carry on going. That comes into play in the Senior Bowl game. That ruling then becomes a thing. Watson had the instinct to get back up and continue the run. He did get tackled, but he showed that impressive knowledge of the game that he's going to be walking into in his first action where that ruling is live, whereas some players would still be in the mindset of college. And I think from the whole practice throughout the week, as I say, he's probably one of the most consistent pass catchers. He made some great throws. He looks comfortable in making a lot of those throws. He's competitive in the contested catches, and he's got a really quick release when it comes to beating the man at the top of the route, and that gives him the space then to make those catches. So I think he, out of all of the national wide receivers, along with Shakir, who we spoke about earlier before, obviously he had to step out. I would say Watson was probably the most impressive out of all of them. And then the only other guy I wanted to mention on the national offensive side is the offensive lineman, and that it was Zeon Johnson. I think Johnson came in as one of the top, well, if not the top interior lineman for the Senior Bowl. And I think the practice and the game showed that he was solid throughout. His blocking was on point from the outset. He even got put into center on Thursday and looked solid there as well. He just looked the most NFL ready interior lineman on the maybe. There's an argument to say he was the best overall lineman throughout the whole week and the game. I think Trevor Penning, another national offensive tackle, also had a solid week as well. But I think Zeon Johnson came in as the top interior and left as the same, and only proved what people were already thinking and expecting from him.
Okay, cool. Let's do some defensive players before I move on. We might as well stay. We might as well stay with the national team because I'm still on that tab. Ash, of the national team, who stood out the most for you on defense?
Boy Maiafa, edge from Minnesota. In particular on the game, he was the national team player of the game, not MVP, but the national team's player of the game. He's disruptive, couple of sacks, made himself busy against the offensive lineman for all the snaps he played, and then in practice, he's regarded as one of the most athletic edges in the whole class, and he came in to the practice and showed that he's explosive, he's quick off the bounce, he's agile, but he's then also got the power to essentially rip away from the defenders as well. He's not just a speedster on the edge. He can get into the contest with a lineman and beat him, usually with his speed around the edge, but he can use his arms to swim and to rip from the lineman. And he impressed pretty much every day on practice, and then was one of the top players of the whole game on game day.
Okay. Do we know? Obviously, he didn't make it. I don't think he made it into our first round of the mock draft a couple of weeks ago, did he? I don't think he did he?
Who, Maiafa? Mafe? Yeah. I don't think he did.
Do you think this has perhaps helped him be in first round contention, or will he be a second or third round guy?
I think it has definitely helped his stock. He was mightily impressive, and if there wasn't a couple of one other guy in particular that impressed in the practices, then yeah, he probably would have been in the first round. I think he is in that conversation, and he will stay in that conversation. But yeah, he was overshadowed in the practice, at least by someone on the American side. But before we get to the American side, I think we've probably got to talk about the MVP of the game, which was Perrion Winfrey, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma. This man is a monster. He was disruptive the whole game. I think the main takeaway from those who haven't seen the Senior Bowl itself is just how impressive both defenses were, and the defensive lines in particular, and the edges. But Perrion Winfrey just made himself a nuisance from the outset in the game. In particular, I think he also got 2 sacks, but just disruptive from the outset. At times, the offensive lineman just didn't know what to do with him. And then in training, come in day one, and he just bowled people over and just made it look easy at times. And he's done himself a tremendous job on his draft stock. I think he is, if he wasn't already, he's probably put himself into first round consideration, because he was that dominant throughout the whole of practice, and then also in the game. It's probably, I'd say he's up there with the top player of the whole of the Senior Bowl. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see much of Jermaine Johnson, because I think Winfrey took a little bit out of what we saw from Johnson in the practice, because of what he also then did in the Senior Bowl itself.
You've sort of teased an American player several times, Ash, in the last couple of minutes. Let's talk about this guy. Who is it for you?
It's Jermaine Johnson, edge from Florida State. Sorry, he's slowly been moving up people's draft boards and being spoken about more and more as a first round edge. And coming out of the Senior Bowl week, he has almost cemented that for me. He was levels above a lot of the players throughout the majority of the week in terms of practice. Made himself look like he was already playing in the NFL at times. Explosive, strong, quick off the snap in terms of from the edge. He knew that he knew that he had to impress because of the expectation that was already on him, and he's done that and more, in my opinion. It's a shame that we didn't get to see a great deal from him. I don't think he practiced at all on the Thursday, and then I don't recall him being involved on the game itself. But just from those 2 days that we saw, head and shoulders for the large part above anybody there, and he's going to the combine as well, so he's going to have more of an opportunity to show that. But yeah, just an absolute standout from minute one until he left. I think he sat out of training on the Thursday because of an ankle injury, and I'm fairly confident he didn't take any snaps in the Senior Bowl itself. But just from what we saw from him, as I say, dominant throughout, shown everything you want from an edge, and yeah, he's done himself a world of good. And I would be very surprised if he is now not taken in the first round or in heavy discussion to be a first round pick.
Well, the first round, as I mentioned earlier, could get sideways. So it would be no shock for him to get into the first round based on his 2 days of wrecking ball production at the Senior Bowl. Actually, I think for me that was perhaps a little bit more in depth talking on the players than I thought we were going to do. Because
Sorry.
I thought no, it's a good thing, obviously, because I'm learning here as well as Rush Nation are. Everybody knows of the two of us. You're the teacher and I am the pupil. From the game that we haven't talked about, is there anything from the game that you want to speak about that perhaps we haven't already mentioned?
We've discussed a lot of the standout players from the game and why they stood out. I think maybe a couple of guys that we didn't mention on the national side, tight end Jake Ferguson. He had a solid day, 62 yards off 3 catches and a touchdown. Looked good in the air, looked confident in the air, which we expect from him. Ferguson's been spoken about as one of the top tight ends. Maybe not so much as the McBride and Likely, but Ferguson has been up there in consideration. And the game itself, he looks solid. McBride arguably is the top tight end in the draft at the moment, and that was apparent from the week of practice and then the game itself. He was regularly making himself look busy and coming up with catches and blocks. There was a couple of occasions where he was unfortunately put on the floor from an edge, but you see that at times for tight ends. He is more of a passing tight end, but he makes an effort in the blocking game, which is only going to be a good thing when it gets to the NFL, because more often than not, we do see even passing tight ends need to be involved in the blocking game. I think that's probably it from the national. We covered a lot of them. Boyd Mayfair, Perry and Winfrey. They're the main guys. Rashad White. And then from the American side, I had Sam Howell, who we've spoken about. Who else have I got on my lists? Malik Willis, who we've spoken about. I think a couple of other guys. He was the American player of the game, was D'Angelo Malone, the Western Kentucky edge. The game itself, I'll be honest, I didn't see a great deal from him in practice. I didn't really get a chance to look at him individually, and nothing really popped out for me. But the game itself, he was mightily impressive. As I say, both defensive linemen were impressive for the whole game. But I think from the American side alone, D'Angelo Malone was the standout. He was involved in a number of tackles. He got a sack. I think he got half a sack. It was an assisted, but regularly disrupted the offensive lines in front of him. And he made himself a handful, and has probably put himself on a few people's radars, because I'll be the first to admit that I hadn't really seen much from him before now. And he is one of those players that I'll be taking a closer look at of his individual tape from Western Kentucky because of this game. And then really the only other person is Damien Pierce, the running back. I don't think we spoke about him from Florida.
Nope.
Again, not a great deal that stood out to me in practice, but on the game, despite the fact he played at running back, which is alongside quarterback when it comes to the Senior Bowl game itself, one of the most difficult to to look at individually because of the rotation. But what he did show is he made himself big in tackles. He went through tackles, but at the same time, he then found the holes and made people miss. And one highlight that stood out in particular was the one-handed grab in the passing game. What I find crazy about Pierce is just how little he was used at Florida, because from what I've seen on the limited viewing of practice and on the game, is he can pass as well as he can run. And I think he might be one of those running backs that a team's going to look at and maybe take him third or fourth round. And that's going to be a bargain, because he seems to have all of the makings of a guy that a running back that can do it all. Do need to look at him a bit more overall, but that's just my initial assessment on what I've seen from the Senior Bowl and the limited I've seen from him at Florida, which unfortunately is limited because he wasn't used enough in the passing game.
Which makes absolute sense. Listen, we've still got a whole load of time before the draft to dive into that. Ash, we've got a lot of good stuff coming in the pipeline. Do you think we should possibly tell Rush Nation as to what's coming up in the upcoming weeks, or even what to expect next week, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't create the roadmap for fun.
Well, I mean, it's something for us to follow, but it would be good for
it's
everyone
true.
else to jump on board and follow with us.
No, I think it's getting into the nitty gritty now. We are close to the draft. It seems like it's ages away, but let's not forget it's the end of April. It's 2 months, and we're essentially there. So our focus now for the next 6 or 7 weeks is NFL heavy, and those players in particular. So we're going to be doing individual positional breakdowns of all positions. There's going to be a couple where it's going to be combined, because of the talent might not be there. There might not be as many people we want to speak about, but we're going to be doing standalone episodes of individual positions. So quarterback, offensive line, secondary, you name it, we're going to be doing it. We're of course going to be doing some mock drafts. We've got the combine coming up, so we're going to be doing a combine review and our takeaways from that. We've got loads of stuff coming up about the draft now. It is always an exciting time of the year. And I mean, it's one of my favorite times of the year, especially when I sit down and watch individual player tapes, because there's no games going on now, so I can focus solely on the individual players and give people a little bit more attention than just seeing them on a field whilst you're watching games.
Yeah, 100%. If you are worried that we will miss something, I give you the promise now that Ash and I will cover every position, even if it means having to drop emergency podcasts to you at some random point throughout the week. We will cover every position. We will be doing mock drafts. There'll be a combine review, as Ash says, because there's bound to be somebody in there that goes ridiculously off the charts who we weren't expecting to, and then like Mekhi Becton, then suddenly their draft stock is a million times stronger. So that will be that will be happening for sure. And listen, if you want to get yourself some merch, if you're watching on the video stream, and if you're not, head over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notifications for when we go live. We would hugely appreciate it. That probably should have dropped that at 8 minutes, not 58 minutes, but hey, we got on a roll. If you want some merch, because the shop will be closing for a reshuffle and some new products going in, if you want, you grab yourself an old school logo camo t-shirt like I have one in the video, go get one of those. Or if you want a grey jumper like my man Ash over there is sporting, which you can't quite see because there you go, pop it up. Actually, that's a limited edition staff one. You can't get that on the website, but you can get the same thing that isn't faded. That's over on the website as well. There'll be new products dropping really soon. Shout out to those original audio listeners if you're listening to the podcast. Thank you ever so much for listening. If you are new and live on the stream, thank you for the hour of your Wednesday evening you have spent with us. A couple of British guys talking about college football and getting names wrong. It's just how we do. And shout out to those in the comment section. We have hugely appreciated your interaction. Ash, have I missed anything? I feel like that was a good outro.
I feel like that was a great outro. Yeah, no, nothing extra from me.
Perfect. If you want to get involved on Twitter, follow us at 5 Yard College. Head over to the website 5yardrush.co.uk to check out the articles being dropped by everyone over there. And I promise player reviews will be on their way. I've had a couple more in my inbox, so I've got absolutely no excuses now. I need to get them out because draft season is fast approaching. As Ash said, Rush Nation, this has been a blast. It's been an enlightening session on the Senior Bowl because I haven't got to see it all yet. But I guess, Ash, what are we doing next week? Do we have a specific target next week that we're aiming to look at?
Yes, quarterbacks next week. We're going to be breaking down. I think we've targeted 6 or 7 of the top guys in the draft. So not only those ones that we've spoken about tonight, but a few of the guys that weren't at the Senior Bowl, and maybe a few other surprises to keep an eye out for.
Whoop whoop, boys! If you are off and you want to jump on any of these positional reviews, hit us up in the chat. You are always welcome to come on, and we can triple threat or quad battle this one out for a quarterback, running back, whatever you fancy, really. And then always, Rush Nation, Saturdays are for Rushing 2.